Everyone for joining us tonight for the Board of Trustees meeting of August 28th. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first we'll start with public comment. If anybody wants to come on up. No? Oh, yep, here we have Commissioner.
No, she's going to.
She's not coming. Okay.
No.
All right, then we'll go ahead and close public comment. Next, we have approval of the board minutes for August 14th. We've all had a chance to look them over.
I do have one change that's been noted to me by Mr. Shostak, which is to just a rewording of item 5 with that change.
Which rewording? Oh,
Item 5 of the minutes.
in the minutes. Okay. Perfect. So do we have a motion with that stipulation to it?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Barnett,
Support.
support by Trustee Shostak. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. So next, we have honoring Brian E. Kepes for his 30 years of service to Bloomfield Township. And we're going to have it presented by Clerk Brooke.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. This is our opportunity to thank Brian for his commitment to public service in Bloomfield Township for 30 years. The Township Board has a proclamation, but before we get to that, we have a special guest here, Marcia Gershenson, Vice Chair of the Board of Commissioners for Oakland County, also has a proclamation to share with us.
And I'm going to ask Brian's family to join me. His wife Fern, his daughter Lauren, husband Adam. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to honor great people that have contributed so much to our community. But this one is a sad one. This is a hard one for me because I've loved working with you, Brian. You've done such great things for this community, and I am definitely going to miss you.
Before you read it, I would just say, Marcia, that you encouraged me to run way back when.
That's right, I remember.
You did.
So this is a proclamation honoring Brian, whereas committed public servants such as Brian, who deftly apply their professional skills in service to their communities, help build trust in our local Oakland County government institutions, and community-minded and fiscally focused, Brian has served Bloomfield Township and its residents in both appointed and elected capacities for the past 30 years. It's longer than me. His public service with the township began in 1994 when he became member of the Tax Board of Review, which he later went on to chair. He was also a member of and chaired the Zoning Board of Appeals starting in 1995. Mr. Kepes served on both boards until 2009 when he was unanimously appointed as a Bloomfield Township trustee, which I remember very well when that happened, a position voters elected him to in 2010 and then again in 2012. As a trustee, he was instrumental in the creation of the township's financial sustainability commitment to work with investment firms in 2015, and also served as trustee of the Bloomfield Township Retired Employees Health Care Benefits Trust. A lot of service, Brian. In 2016, he was elected by township residents as treasurer and re-elected 4 years later. In this role for the past 7 years, Mr. Kepes has managed property tax collection as the department's main function, maintained accurate records of all revenue and disbursements, and overseen the processing of all money transactions involving real property taxes, personal property taxes, special assessments, water bills, and other departments. And I know at the county we've called on Brian for his expertise more than once. Mr. Kepes has brought renewed respect, reliability, and transparency to the Bloomfield Township Treasurer's Office following a period of financial turmoil. During his tenure, Mr. Kepes dramatically increased township earnings, investing funds in safe government securities, and eliminating excessive investment broker fees. And as a certified public accountant, Mr. Kepes is a graduate of Michigan State University with degrees in accounting and business. And following employment as an accountant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Kepes founded SRK Management Company and SRK Realty Company. He served as president of both since 1989. With a longtime dedication to community and religious organizations, with which his wife shares her commitment to our community as well, Mr. Kepes has held active leadership roles in the Fresh Air Society, Tamarack Camps, and the Jewish Federation of Metro Detroit. Further, he's a member of the International Council of Shopping Centers, the 100 Club of Detroit, and Michigan State University President's Club. On the special occasion of his 3 decades of service to Bloomfield Township and residents, we join with Brian Kepes' colleagues, friends, and family, including his wife Fern, daughter and son-in-law Lauren and Adam Rubin, and their children, Abraham and Wallace, and their son Max and his wife Carly, who are in New York, to express our gratitude for his dedication, sacrifice, and professionalism. And I can attest that when you are a devoted public servant, your family has to be supportive and involved as well. So therefore, David T. Woodward, Chair of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, and myself, and the entire Oakland County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim special commendation to Brian Kepes. We wish him the very best in his future endeavors as he ends his tenure as Bloomfield Township Treasurer on August 31, 2023.
We have one more proclamation to honor your service, Brian. Ours just says ditto. So let me go through many of the same items on behalf of the Board of Trustees. This is the proclamation that we are proposing for tonight, which is, whereas the Bloomfield Township Board of Trustees adopts this resolution to honor Treasurer Brian E. Kepes for his 30 years of service to our community. And whereas Mr. Kepes began his service when he was appointed to the Board of Review on March 14, 1994, and was subsequently reappointed through 2009. And whereas Mr. Kepes was also appointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals and served from 1994 through 2008. And whereas during his service on both of these crucial boards, Mr. Kepes reviewed hundreds of citizen petitions and served with distinction, including being selected by his colleagues to be chairperson. And whereas in March 2009, Mr. Kepes was appointed to be trustee on the Board of Trustees and subsequently elected to the position in November 2010 and reelected in 2012. And whereas Mr. Kepes was elected to the office of treasurer in 2016 and reelected in 2020, during which he made wise decisions in investment, banking, and bond issuance, to name a few key contributions. Whereas Mr. Kepes played a key role in the creation of the Financial Sustainability Committee and implemented many process improvements that enhanced resident experiences, such as paperless billing and online payments. And whereas during these 30 years of service, Mr. Kepes also served in leadership roles in several community and philanthropic organizations. And whereas, as an integral member of township leadership, Mr. Kepes made a positive contribution to the township's workplace culture of caring and excellence, and has helped to ensure that the township has the tools and people to deliver top quality services to the Bloomfield community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees recognizes Brian E. Kepes for his commitment to public service and is thankful for his 30 years of caring, committed, and passionate service to the Bloomfield Township community. Be it known to all reading this resolution that it was adopted by the Township Board of Trustees on August 28, 2023, and included in the minutes as a permanent record. And if that could be the motion.
I'll make the
Second.
motion.
Motion by trustee Barnett,
Support.
support by trustee Shostak. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want
I could say a few words before
Oh,
Brian does, because I've known Brian a long time, and as Marcia said, it certainly saddens me that you're leaving the board. I enjoy the board very much, but you bring so much to the board and to the township, and you've contributed so much to the township, always doing it because of your love for the township, never because it's about yourself, or never because you're political, because it's never about yourself, and nothing is political with you. It's just trying to do the best thing for the people of Bloomfield Township. And I can say, because of all of your contributions, Bloomfield Township certainly is a much better place to live, and you've made very positive contributions. And I know how much you love the township, and it shows. So.
Thank you.
Anything else before Brian?
Well, I guess I'll first go in order and thank Marcia, also for your years of service, and again for your encouragement for me to run, which wasn't exactly an easy choice for me to want to do, but you encouraged me to do it, and I thank you for it. I also want to thank the Board of Commissioners and County Exec Coulter. I've had an excellent working relationship with the administration, including Clerk Brook, Treasurer Wittenberg, and additionally, actually my first big endorsement was from former County Exec Al Brooks Patterson, and I also had an excellent working relationship with Treasurer Meisner. So, you know, the county has very much helped the Bloomfield, and I appreciate it, and we appreciate it as the township. So thank you, and thank you very much again for the proclamation. So Bloomfield. Well, I am deeply and humbly filled with gratitude and emotions. I'm going to try to get through this without using my tissue. So thank you, Clerk Brook, Supervisor Walsh, and Board for this proclamation honoring my 30 years of service to Bloomfield. Know that I am honored and privileged to have been of service. I thank each of you for the opportunity to work with you, and wish you and the township the very best. And I'm confident that you have the resources to take Bloomfield to greater heights. I specifically recognize and salute Trustee Barnett for his longstanding and exemplary commitment and service to Bloomfield, and provide congratulations to soon-to-be Treasurer Shostak for a position he is well prepared and suited, and confident he will provide the community continued fiscal strength and stability. First, I thank my family for their enduring love, encouragement, and support, and understanding, including missing meals with them due to public meetings. My wife, Fern, my life partner and guidance counselor, my children, Lauren and Adam, who helped me run my successful campaigns, Max and Carly, whom operated my New York sign campaign, and my grandsons, Abe and Wally, who provide me assurance that tomorrow is always a better day. It's been a 30-year plus relationship with the government of Bloomfield when I first questioned and challenged the property tax assessment on our home to today. It's been a wonderful journey and adventure. In addition to my family, I'm thankful for the encouragement and support of prior administrations, former supervisors Corzine, Payne, and Savoy, former clerks Cotton and Roncelli, and former treasurer Arslanian. Along the way, we successfully worked together through many challenges, always striving for a better and stronger Bloomfield, which also resulted in dear lifelong friendships. The work of the township is conducted by our talented and dedicated professional staff. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work directly with all of the department heads and chiefs and many of our staff. Please know that to a person, they all strive to provide Bloomfield residents superior service. I want to specifically acknowledge the Township Treasury Department, Deputy Treasurer Teresa Renaud, who flawlessly and always with a smile operates the day-to-day treasury processing functions, with Assistant Deputy Fisher, and held together by Treasurer Assistant Gerke and Assistants Snaves and Watts. The Township Financial Sustainability Committee serves in an advisory capacity to the Township Board and Treasurer. I'm indebted to the invaluable counsel of the general community members of the committee, its chair, David Petoskey, and members, Chris Kolinsky and David Olson. Together with the support and assistance of everyone previously recognized and Township outside professionals, and for that I did, and for all that I did not specifically mention, I sincerely apologize. I was afforded the opportunity and ability to keep the Kepes commitment. I provided and signed the Kepes commitment when I first ran to be Bloomfield Treasurer. That's the Kepes commitment. I kept the card on my desk and let it guide me during my tenure as treasurer. It is as follows. The Kepes commitment: putting the taxpayer first, maximize investment returns, improve efficiency and eliminate waste, professionalism, team building, and problem solving, open door policy with regular office hours, open and transparent government. Every day, I will work hard to provide you a local government of which all of the citizens of Bloomfield Township will be proud. I can assure you, I worked hard and hope you are proud. Thank you.
Sure. So these are the proclamations that we have from the Oakland County and from Board of Trustees. Frank, for you. Thanks for
Hey, Brian, will you pose? Well, I was like right in the middle of the one for them because they were here. I did mine last week because I knew that it would be more teary this week, so I got it out when it was a little easier.
Exactly.
Is there anyone else that would like to share anything? No, thank you so much, Brian, and thank you to your beautiful family for being here, and thank you, Commissioner Gershenson, as well, and to Supervisor Savoy as well, and all of our favorites back there. All right, thank you so much. So let's go on to our next one, because you still get to be here for some business.
Yep.
All right. So next we have consider the award of the Bloomfield Township Maintenance Sewer Program presented by Paul Horan, our Public Works Superintendent.
Good evening, Board, and thank you again, Mr. Kepes, for all your years of service, and it's been a pleasure working with you for this past 11 months almost since I've been here, so wish you the best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
So our sewer maintenance program, the background, we started it in about 2017. We entered into a professional service agreement with Liquiforce. That was the company name at the time. They are now currently Granite Inliner. Then the reason behind that service was to provide sewer maintenance as needed to a certain amount of sewers that needed more attention than what we did on our regular routine basis. A lot of these sewers they have grease issues, root issues, issues that require more attention on a more frequent basis. Back in April, there was a price increase. There hasn't been a price increase since the initial. So with that price increase, we decided to put it out to actual bid, write some specs for it to get more details and to better serve our sewers and to get the best price possible. The proposal that we wrote up, it was for a 3-year contract with the ability to extend for an additional 2 years. The purpose of the sewer program is to clean and televise the sewers on the township's current sewer maintenance list. And right now, I believe there's about 270 sewers that are on our maintenance sewer that the township staff has identified as needs extra attention. And when it first started, I want to say there was roughly around 150 to 170 when it first started. So each year it kind of grows. So our plan is to prevent that from growing, to find out, get to the grit of some of these issues, the grease issues, whatnot, find out where they're coming from, and eventually eliminate these from the maintenance sewers, as opposed to just going and cleaning them some of them are cleaned on a monthly basis, some on a bi-monthly, based on the history of it. So the goal of this new program is to get a detailed timeline on these. So this 270 list will hopefully shrink, and then at times it'll grow and then come back down, depending on what we find. You know, the proposal states that we wanted a company to come in that can do all this as one. So root control, spot lining, if they televise the sewer and they notice that there's a separated joint or something, they can go in and just do a quick spot line, as opposed to letting us know and then we get somebody else out there and they would re-camera the line and then re-spot line it when they're already there on site. They can come right back either the next day or right on site and spotline it. And as for the root control, basically what was done in the past was they would just cut the roots out and then come back periodically and cut the roots. With the root control program, they will actually be putting root treatment into those root areas after they're cut. And then that root treatment itself is guaranteed for 2 years. So we won't need to be cleaning those sewers every couple months or every 6 months or whatnot. The root control it kills the roots and they don't come back. And the root treatment control is a lot cheaper than just going in there and cameraing it every few months or cutting the roots out. And we wanted all this to be one contractor to be able to handle all this, because it's more efficient. It's a better fit for all of us. With each sewer, we're requiring them to provide a pipeline assessment with each sewer and document what their suggestions are, what they find. For the grease ones, again, we're looking to be able to identify where the grease is actually coming from. It's hard to identify that just based on the grease in the line. If it's on an like a commercial line or whatnot, you can tell that it's coming from a food prep area. But which one? Who do you advise? Who do you say, hey, you got to stop dumping the grease, right? So the plan on here is to identify that, and then eventually educate all the food prep areas of what they're dumping, and to eventually end that grease going into the sewer. So again, we won't have to go out there monthly or bi-monthly to maintain the grease out of there. And as I said, the maintenance sewers, they are always growing. It's hard to predict. If our normal routine, like say we do happen to get a backup and our sewer's backed up, once we break it free, we will clean it, we'll televise it and see what the issue is. And then from there, we determine if we want to put it on the maintenance sewer program. So that's where we get a lot of these maintenance sewer programs. People get it back up. A lot of them are due to grease. So with it being always growing, our plan is to shrink it. There's not an exact amount that'll cost year after year. It's one of those ones that we want to be able to provide that service when needed as they come, because you never know when they're going to come. But we just want to get them off the list, get them on a plan. Based on the past few years, some years are higher than normal or higher than others. Some years are lower. During the COVID years, not many people they weren't out there as much. This last year, they weren't out as much. They came back at about I think in March, and they did a lot of cleaning. They haven't cleaned since I put this out to bid. So once and that contractor actually did not bid on this, their current contractor, because I don't think they have the capability of doing all three. Like I said, our goal was to get a company that can do all three: the grease, the roots, the televising and the reporting, and come up with a more detailed plan. Like I said, there's not exact amount that cost. Some of the years it will cost higher. Based on our bid tabulation, we had 2 companies that bid. Based on the bid tabulation, the unit pricing, and the ability to perform all the work described in the RFP, we do recommend that the board awards the Bloomfield Township Maintenance Sewer Program contract to Pipe Tech. I apologize, looks like there's a typo on this memo, but we award the contract to Pipe Tech Infrastructure Services not to exceed $350,000 per fiscal year.
Any questions for Paul?
First of all, I think it's a great idea to put all 3 together. I think it'd be far more efficient. I think it'll be better for the residents and for the businesses. What I'm wondering about is the grease. How do they determine which restaurant? I mean, they literally evaluate the grease and.
So there is another part of the grease program in the works. So basically what they will do is when they camera it, you'll be able to see grease sediment and whatnot, so it could get us in a more general idea. But we do have in the works another separate grease, we'll call it a grease education program, that when we identify where the grease is coming from, basically the food prep areas would be notified and educated on. I can't assume that every food prep area knows exactly what to dump, what not to dump, who knows. So the plan is to actually go in there and educate them on every little detail of what to flush, what not to flush, even down to the fact that, do you have certain dispensers in bathrooms, like feminine products and whatnot. You know, if you don't have a feminine product dispenser in the stalls, they're most likely going to get flushed. So it details stuff like that as well. And part of that education program is we will be taking a sample at their clean out. So you take a sample, take it to the lab, which it's all stated in our ordinances. There's a certain amount allowable levels of fog. And with that samples, if they're over that limit, we'll be able to educate them, say, hey, this is what we found out you're dumping in the sewers. This is what you need to not do that. So that's a second part of it. But the initial part is to, if we do get a grease back up, yes, we're gonna go clean it. We're gonna break it free. Then we're gonna camera it. And then that's where we'll find out exactly where we can pinpoint it more to where we're gonna go send the education to.
And once we have the education, there's then enforcement.
Correct. There is in our ordinances a cost of recovery as well.
Okay.
So, but it's the education first. I feel is the right way to go, because they may just not be unknown.
Well, and I can just share, we had one instance, you may remember, when this is a common line that gets blasted out in their office buildings along the way. And unfortunately, one of the people in the office was utilizing the facilities and everything came up.
Oh.
So this is like, it's not just a restaurant, it literally affects all the businesses along the line. So I think this is well needed and well done. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Treasurer Kepes,
Support.
support by Trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And if anybody has any other questions regarding it in the future, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. So now I will give an update on our potential American Rescue Plan Act projects. And Tom can help me along here. Thanks. So this is brought to you, and Treasurer Kepes actually made sure that we had this for you on time because we had promised that we were waiting for some bids. So not everything is done, so we're kind of going to give you where every single one is at the status right now. So just to kind of overview, since we've had a lot of different PowerPoints, we also want to update it so everybody's working off the same one going forward. Currently, we have $2,624,459.33 left because we have already spent for that fire truck, the ladder truck. based on that. So when we're going through of what we have left, we'll go to the next one where we'll talk about, again, there's the platform ladder apparatus. This one was approved, obviously, by us in February. It does take approximately 3 years to make it, but we did already order it. We won't be paying for it until it is done. If for some reason it is done after the cutoff of 2026, because you have to have it allotted by 2024, but not paid out till 2026. If for some reason this goes longer, we will deal with that time. I believe Jason said that we would pay it out at that time, but we feel that there's no need to pay it in advance right now because you don't get a discount for it. It's no reason to pay up front. So we're going to hold that payment back until September or fall of 2025 when it's estimated to be completed. Our next one is the police and fire space needs analysis. So this one we've talked about where in order to apply for these larger grants, and I brought a list of, there were 6 pages of one-time allotments given from the state. The federal government also does it. But these are not small awards. These are awards like our EOC did get $185,000 one year, but they range up to $50 million per person. So some examples of if you are shovel ready, plan ready, you can apply for these. For example, we need a new fire station 3. Dearborn Heights Fire Station got $10 million. Imagine if we could get $10 million towards the cost of what we have estimated is about a $12 million project. So these architectural designs that the RFP already did go out. It was issued in June, and we did get 6 responses back. Both of the chiefs have interviewed everybody, and they will be coming at the next board meeting to give their suggestion. The estimated cost is approximately $90,000 for both of the Fire Station 3 and reimagining the police station here. And they'll come to you with also some other questions of, do you want to expand it past what, basically, if they're already looking there, do you want to look at the whole bottom level versus do you want to just look at the locker rooms in the areas that were originally discussed? So the 2 chiefs will be here in September to discuss that. Our next one is the disaster recovery and continuity. So this is obviously important. The more that you see, especially with weather that's coming, this helps protect us from all of the unthinkable, the tornadoes, the fires, the floods, the terrorist attacks, and even pandemics. When you think of mobile work, having to switch immediately to mobile work during COVID was quite an undertaking. So this will help us be ready with things for mobile work. Hosted environments is basically making sure things are not just here on site, because if God forbid a tornado hit here, we wouldn't have our backup. So a lot of the hosted solutions would be where, you know, whether it's the cloud process or others, where we have the backups on off-site. We also are including, you know, the server access. My husband would love all of this since he's IT. But the gist is everything would be in a safer spot in a remote area. So if we were ever hit, we could still pay our vendors. We can still pay our employees. We can still take in, for example, the last storm. We didn't have as much damage as some of the other communities, but there were tornadoes that hit. Our assessors need to be out there in the field taking damage reports. Our DPW that was here earlier needs to be out there in the field, and they can't take their laptops with them. So we don't even have the iPads for them to go out into the field. We do paper and pen right now. So this would be also to purchase some iPads so that if need be and there is some disaster recovery, we're ready for it. The different quotes, we've already done some quotes. These haven't gone out for RFP yet, but the quotes have been coming in, and the estimated cost of all of it together would be about $250,000. And the reason the RFP hasn't gone out is with IT, you really have to know what you're specifically asking for. And as we're getting in different quotes, we're seeing that some of what we thought we wanted is different. So Will is basically taking in all this information to perfect the RFP that will go out. And next we have records management structure. This is actually going underneath Clerk Brooks' office. And Tom actually was integral in this as well. And the first step is done. They did the first step is creating that framework. It doesn't matter where you're saving things if nobody knows where it's being saved. So for example, some save by address, some save by parcel number, some save by person's name. So when dealing with FOIAs, which again is under Clerk Brook, he deals with that. The faster we can get that information, the better. And that would be that framework of where do you even go to find the documents. There's about 200 years worth of documents out there. some digital, some in paper form. So he has put together an RFP. He and Tom worked on that. So that did go out in June. 3 responses were received, and they'll be coming to us, I believe, in September with their suggestion. Again, this doesn't include the actual scanning yet. That will be the second phase. But the estimated cost just of creating the framework of how do you take in 200 years worth of data into a structure so that we do it correctly going forward, that is an estimated cost of about $400,000. And then once that is completed, then we can go on to the scanning phase. Next is cybersecurity updates. Again, this goes in Will, our new director's wheelhouse. So we're also giving him a little chance to go through because he was taking on some information and he has found some other options. So what he is focused in on is for security upgrades. The cybersecurity, we already have the multi-factor through some of the higher risk. So a lot of us who have at the board level, at department head level, at that higher risk level of where people might try and come in, we all have it. We're looking to actually get it for every single user because now the threats always come in the best way. Once they feel that you've got it here, they'll come in another way. So the multi-factor is something we already have. We're looking to beef it up to every single user. And that's basically where you have an alert comes to your phone and you sign in through that way as well. We also have the enterprise wireless. The endpoint protection isn't just when you think malware. It's not just to detect malware. We're looking for a protection system that examines it, detects it, and responds to it. Right now, Will is our response team. So we're looking to get something a little more robust since he's got his hands full now. And then the password manager. This would be, again, where it's something where you can have auto, I believe Michael also does it, where people say, what's your password? Well, it's constantly redoing it and constantly giving you a new one, which means that it's harder to get. And again, that would be for everybody, so that is per license. The campus, including surveillance, the safety, when we talk about surveillance cameras and security access, we did live in a time where even as shortly as 2020, the front door was locked by hand. And it was locked by a different company, and if that person wasn't here, it wasn't locked. So there were many times as the last person out, there would be someone in there greeting me because the doors were open. And so even something as simple as safety, we've already made sure that everything is on a lock that is through the IT system. But we also are now looking at better surveillance cameras. Those haven't been updated in a very long time to give higher resolution. We're looking for the security access locks. This includes not just locks of the front doors, but the locks in the prison cells. And because again, those are still keyed locks. So this is kind of updating every single lock, every camera in the area. The RFP will be released. They're hoping September 1st. So that should be going out soon. And then the audio video in the police interview room, again, is estimated at that $15,000. So these will be going out and you should have updates on those shortly. Next, we have our phone system. So this one is the one that is, the reason the RFP again hasn't gone out is because there are so many different options. And again, you really need to know what you want. We were under the assumption, we were led to believe there were just 2 options, really easy, you pick it. And really, even with each option itself, on premise, it's the concept of some sound so cheap. One was like, oh, it's $6,000. It's not $100,000. That's because you have to pay for every single phone. So that's about 400 phones. By the time you add all that up, you are right back up there. So it can't be just who's the lowest bidder on what you think. It's tell us everything. Are you included, not included? So Will is rewriting and getting all those prepared for us. The concepts are on premise. Again, it's here. It's all hosted here. The initial cost would be the $110 to $155. That does have an annual maintenance cost, approximately 20%. And the hosted is when you see something, even for example, $46,000 to $170,000. That depended on where the phone's provided or not provided. Another one is sometimes the lower you get, you don't have on-site support if needed. So if we did have a disaster, some of these local companies that might be a little bit more are more because they will come on site and actually do the assistance as needed, not having to call through. So we then have to kind of think, what are we looking for? So he's going to be doing RFPs to get some different options for all of you to look at. And that would be also have an ongoing, but a little bit lower of $2,500 to $6,300. The auditorium updates. So this would be for improving basically the user experience. A lot of people outside of just these streamed meetings, we also have community members who do rent this. Some are HOA or homeowner associations, some are committees in the area, some are groups. So their experience, we do get a lot of comments about the chairs. I'm sure you all sitting out there right now may notice they're not the most comfortable if you're sitting through a long meeting. Nothing in here has really been updated in a very long time. So we're looking at not just the user experience of the rentals for the board meeting, but also technology. Again, it's a little bit cheaper for us to replace these with iPads, the microphones and the cameras along the back there as well. Updating for the chairs for in-person, painting the walls, even something as instead of just completely removing this dais, just simply staining it would be a less expensive option. We talked security before, and the window tinting that came up when we were talking about security. And then the LED lighting would not only offer better lighting, but also offers savings as well, since it costs less to run. Estimated with all of that together will be $250,000. Again, Will is working with Carrie on this because a lot of the technology is actually going through our cable department. So they're working together on this and also with Noah, anything related to the physical improvement of the painting and the blinds and the tinting. So the three of them are working together, and they should have everything set for a release in October. Estimated cost is $250,000. So our next one. So this one has evolved into possible multiple projects. It started with the concept of Chapter 20 drains because we had one come before us. It was a Chapter 20 drain that would help 2 homes, but it would have taken up most of the funding in our drainage, out of the drainage millage. So it became the question of, well, we know of 5 others that have mentioned they're having issues. We should do a study. Well, that study has grown into the fact that it is going to need some different phases and some structure so the HRC and our engineering department know exactly where to go. So there's some different phases that we could do, where the first is, a lot of people don't even know that they own our storm sewer or own their own private storm sewers. For example, we get calls after every storm saying you need to come clean your storm sewer because the subdivision is flooding. Most subdivisions don't know that they own it and they should have been maintaining it. Because we're not a city that is mostly private owned. There are some that are county owned. If it's in the right of way, that would be an RCOC or a road commission drain. There are some Oakland County drains as well, but everything else would be a private drain. So the first concept of a phase would be to actually identify the different storm drains in the township and who would own them. The next would be, once you find out who owns it, educating them, sending them information. And again, this came up too because when there was an issue in Wabeek, there was a lawsuit because nobody knew who actually owned it, but nobody wanted to pay it. So everybody was getting sued, and it was unnecessary because it ended up being exactly what we thought. It was a private drain, and that HOA is responsible. So we can avoid those things by educating everybody and sending out, this is the storm drain that you own. Let them know that we don't know all of it. We can just see the point that comes out to the area that we can see, but they would end up getting some education, again, on best management practices. Because I don't feel that people would avoid maintaining it if they knew it. I honestly think that there is just most people assume the township owns it. Next is, after we educate, is investigating of all of what we learned throughout this drainage study. Are there potentially areas that meet the requirements for the Chapter 20 drains? And if they do we have the funding to do it? And if not, do we discuss doing a drainage millage to cover these? The Chapter 20 drain guarantees that it will be maintained through the county. So that's that safety net of, although it's a millage that we currently have, it guarantees that 50 years later, people move out of the homes, they don't have to worry about showing up and realizing that nobody's taking care of it. But not everywhere will qualify. So first, it's a matter of finding out where they are, who owns them, and if any can be under Chapter 20. The concept of how long this would take would definitely take us outside of the scope of 2026. So then it becomes the HRC would definitely be the one spearheading this. They already have some information on some of the drainage areas, so they're not starting from scratch. But the amount of engineers that would be involved on this project is more than we have here in-house. And they also have their normal day-to-day. So HRC would be the spearheads. And then again, it would be after this, after we have this presentation, I'd like to get some feedback from the board of what you feel would be important so that it helps guide the environmental engineering department of how they can guide HRC. Because this is just kind of ballooned into such a big, it's almost too overwhelming to take on their own, and they kind of want some guidance. Okay, so the next one. So these are the outliers. So of the amount that we have, there's approximately 1.4 million unassigned. That's if everything comes back exactly like the estimates are. If any are over, obviously we'd have less. If any are less, we'd have more. So of the ones that we don't have costs for, that we've all mentioned, there's 2 that would be listed on our possible projects. Again, it would be the discussion of, would you be interested in the records management first? If that were covered, would you be interested in the storm drain? Again, Corey, our director of engineering, has said that although all of them would be outside of the size and scope of ARPA, there's a chance that a portion or a phase could be done. So then another thing that Jason had mentioned is that there's always, of course, the backlog of vehicles and equipment to be purchased that we could also do instead of through the equipment fund. We could use ARPA as well if these 2 are something that we couldn't get in time or with enough money. I think, is that my last one? Oh, no. Yep, that's it. So now I'd like some questions and some input from you, especially on the chapter 20 and the outliers. Or are there any questions? Is there any surprises? Is it kind of where you thought it'd be?
Well, based on previous discussions, I don't really think there's anything that's a big surprise. It kind of follows what the board had discussed pretty much. And what I would be interested in, as you mentioned, that different departments are going to be giving presentations to us based on RFPs, and so we can at least look at the expected costs and see where they come in, if it's below, at, or above. And at that point, can make decisions on, well, we'll have more information. So we can make decisions on, are there additional funds? And if so, which direction would they go? Which projects?
And then once we realized that there was a surplus, even if we did them all, that took away the need to wait for everything to RFP at the one time. So you'll be getting them piecemeal so we can get some out quicker. Anyone else have questions? How about the drain study? Would you be interested in going to that route and trying to find out who owns it and educate them? Or are you interested in, there's the other, it originally started with those 5 locations as well. So are we looking for a more holistic overview of what's in the area? Are we looking to fix the ones that they know now?
If I could just follow up.
Yeah.
No, I'm personally more interested in a more holistic looking at the overall needs of the community rather than just the 5 houses or so, because there are many areas in the township that are at risk of having water issues. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure we look at it and do our due diligence, because we hate to have problems down the road because, we really weren't stewards of taking care of this.
Well said, I completely agree.
Yeah, and to add to that, what you said that, in some instances, the county owns it, in some instances, we own it, in some instances, the residents own that drainage system, and I think it would be really important to know, because we had issues when a few years ago where it wasn't clear who owned it, and yet people were having a backup. That's not the time to try and figure out blame or who's going to have to pay for the solution. So I think the knowledge would be valuable.
And just to point out, we own very few. We own about 10 out of over 1,000 that we know of so far. So we did find 10 that in the early years, 60s, 70s, 80s, that it wasn't written down properly, and we also didn't know that we owned it. And now we're paying for very high cost to fix something that had been maintained for 50 years. So we don't want that to happen to the homeowners that are going to deal with that as well.
right, almost all of the stormwater infrastructure is owned by, homeowners, HOAs. They're private. They were installed when the subdivisions were built, usually to the 10-year flood numbers in the 50s and 60s, which are nothing compared to what the current rain amounts are. And so, yeah, this is one of these things, a service we can do given the changing climate patterns we're experiencing these days. The past week, we had 2 storms that were quite large. This is an opportunity to help educate folks about what impacts they might experience and let them know what they can do, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree. To Trustee Murray's point, after the disaster has happened, that's not, the time to try to figure everything out. And speaking from personal experience, I have my office in Birmingham, which is a house. The structure is a house. It's own commercial. My basement flooded. Birmingham says, we have nothing to do with it. Anyway, so I mean, for me, I'll just say, as a community member, as a resident, as a business owner, sure, to find out that I'm responsible for it after the fact, I'm even if I'm responsible, I'm still not going to be happy with the city, because why didn't you educate me? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me that this was a potential hazard that I would be facing? So I think it would be prudent, although we wouldn't be responsible for all of those repairs, to at least be able to educate community members. And then I think when these storms do continue to happen, that will alleviate our staff having to field these calls of angry residents saying, my basement is flooded and what are you going to do about it? Only to then learn it's their responsibility to take care of it.
I would just add, I think there's a lot of education for both us understanding, or the township understanding what it owns, and I think they're a good idea. But I think from the standpoint of the community, for what they own, what they need to maintain, and how to maintain it, and even what expectations are once it rains. So when we have the swales, the ditches along the road where some of those are set up to hold water, and people will call up and say it's holding water. Well, they may be designed to do that. There also may be situations where, again, the sediment has been filling in my neighborhood. It could be filling in for 60 years. They've never been cleaned out. On top of it, people put in their culverts under the driveways and they have to raise them up. And then at a certain point, it's never going to be right unless everyone does everything at the same time. So I think along that basis, there just needs to be an understanding that it may never be exactly perfect, that this is kind of the way it is. But there are some things, I think, specifically areas that right now are definitely having problems, have been having problems, that can be evaluated. Whether a Chapter 20 drain can be done or not is going to be a function of those people in that area anyway. If they don't want to comply with doing it, then either the townships have to go through eminent domain, or the county, I guess, at that point. And I don't know if that's something we necessarily, the townships is going to want to force people to do. So I think a lot of this is going to be very much an educational process. And I think the sooner that we do that, the better we're all going to be. The other scenario is how much capacity we can give to our evergreen system, and what capacity they have even to take it. Which is then really a more holistic scenario with the general drain of the greater community. So again, my comment, I guess, is the sooner the better for as these rains continue to occur and the snows and everything else.
It was good to hear, because that's where I was thinking that would be where it went, but I did want to confirm, because you actually touched on something where the 10-year versus 100. Right now, if you fix something, if it hasn't broken yet, you fix it to maintain what you are right now, which is the 10-year, which some HOAs can handle. If we wait till it breaks, or if they wait till it breaks and it has to be completely replaced, it has to be done to the 100-year storm level, and that is a lot more expensive for the HOAs. So this would be a way to not only educate but help and prepare. So that's good to hear, because that's the way I thought that we'd be leaning. I just wanted some guidance as well. So thank you. Does anyone want to add anything on? No? All right. Then we'll go on to the next one. We have Director Jason Tice here today for a presentation of our legacy costs and the pension and retiree health care.
So also with us, just audio only, is Jack Shimaleski from Milliman. He's currently our actuary. Just in case listening in, and if there's something that you wanted to direct a question directly to him, or he wanted to chime in on anything along the way.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so legacy costs, which is pension and retiree health care. So a few definitions and acronyms. Actuary, which we have one on the line with us today. Independent, hired by the township. Third-party professional with advanced mathematical skills. Deals with the measurement and management of risk and uncertainty. GASB, you've heard before, that's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. It's also an independent private sector organization. They basically tell us how to account for and report on most things in the financial world, and not just on legacy costs. Defined benefit, in parentheses DB, so that's to provide a fixed pre-established benefit for employees at retirement. And DC, kind of the opposite, is defined contribution. You're not determining what the benefit will be, but you're determining what you're contributing towards that benefit. So in simple terms for tonight's presentation, what are legacy costs? They're long-term obligations from employee benefit plans, and in the township's case, originating from over 60 years ago, and also in our case that have since been closed to new employees. So again, for the defined benefit pension plan, we'll just refer to that going forward as the pension. And then the other post-employment benefit plan, acronym OPEB, I try to refer to that going forward just as retiree healthcare to keep it simple. So the quick summary of those two, we'll start on the left with the pension. As of the latest actuarial report from a third-party Milliman, there were 99 active employees currently working that are still going to receive that benefit at some point. 15 inactive, so those would be no longer actively working with us, but they worked long enough at some point in the past to vest some sort of benefit. And once they become qualified to draw on that, then they would move from inactive to active status. Then you have 309 retirees and beneficiaries. So that's everyone that's already drawing on the plan that worked longer ago or even recently retired, as we still have a lot of employees going off on that plan. As of the 1/1/23 actuarial report, that plan, that liability is 89.7% funded. To refresh your memory on the closing of that, so that plan was hired, not available to any new, or was closed, not available to any new hires. For most of our population in 2005, there was one group, the fire, that with arbitration going on, it was delayed to 2007. And then the annual funding requirement is the ADC, actuarially determined contribution. That terminology changed in the last few years. It used to be the ARC, actuarially required contribution. Switching over to the right side, the other legacy cost, the retiree healthcare. Again, from the most recent actuarial report from Milliman, there were 123 actives, 2 inactives, and then 380 retirees and beneficiaries. As of the March 31, 23 GASB report, there was 22.6% funded. That plan was closed to new hires in 2011, so about 6 years after the defined benefit pension. And then just a reminder that we do have the annual funding requirement per corrective action plan filed with the state of Michigan. and we're doing our annual filings as required to keep up on that mandate. So we'll first go through the DB pension plan. What is it? Benefit offered to employees hired before it was closed that provides a defined monthly retirement payment based on certain criteria, such as years of service and the average of their most recent salaries, along with the multiplier defined by their union contract. Why does the township have a pension plan or used to have a pension plan? They're very common for careers in public service. Actually, there are still some, if not many, municipalities that offer that plan for new hires today. But any that do are subject to more stringent rules under the new state PA 202. They're negotiated through union contracts. Again, we've closed it to new hires, and those new hires are enrolled in a 401A plan, which is a defined contribution. Those that aren't familiar with that, similar to a 401k. What drives the pension liability, required funding, and determines percent funded. So you have the liability, and the amount that the township is required to contribute is determined annually by the actuary, in our case, Milliman. We've always paid the required funding in the pension plan. The actuary reviews and compares the most recent calendar year's actual activities to the assumptions that were used. So with each annual report, they're not just looking at going forward, they're also comparing how did the prior year report come to fruition with what they had assumed in the past, and then updating all their forecasts forward. That includes looking at the benefit payments to retirees, which keeps going up because we have no new enrollments into the plan, but you have more people withdrawing from it as they retire from the township. And of course, market performance is a big player in our funding percentage as the market goes up and down with the invested pension assets. Milliman prepares both an actuarial report and a separate GASB report. So what is the actuarial report? It's based on the plan year, which is a calendar year, not based on a fiscal year. The general purpose is to determine the required contribution for the next fiscal year, the ADC. And that ADC is paid in one lump sum annually during the calendar year from the township budgets. It's included in the budgets and then paid from the budgets. It's based on actual census data that's allocated across the budgets based on who has the plan, if they're already a retiree, whether they're a retiree from fire, the cost that is from that specific individual is now being paid out of the current year fire budget and so forth. So everyone is assigned to the department that they worked in, and so everything is allocated out based on that. Additionally, it reviews how the plan is performing compared to assumptions and then provides updated projections of future year funding levels. And so there's this link here. If you click on that, it's more of a reminder that there is a finance page. It shows up right on the main bloomfieldtownship.org site. I believe it's the far left icon. It's a $sign. That will take you to a whole menu of budgets, audited financial statements, and kind of the point I put in here was a reminder that these actuarial reports and get actuarial reports for both pension and OPEB are out there for people to see. So we did, as I was preparing this over the last few months, we received the most recent pension actuarial that's out there. It's using census data as of 1/1/23, and it's prepared for fiscal year ending 3/31/25. So the reason for that kind of length and time between when it was the data that was being used and then the future fiscal year is so that when we're budgeting for 24-25 fiscal year, we know what that year's ADC amount is going to be because we have to pay it. There were past years that it was the opposite, where we had already put in the budget and then we got the actuarial report and we had to adjust. So a few years ago, we've corrected that, and so this is a better method to get that actual number in the budget. Calendar year 22 ended with a decline in market value of invested pension assets. That was the largest decline in the past 5 years. That had an effect on the actuarial report. So the plan assets declined by 6.2% when the assumption is to earn 6% annually. That equated to market loss of about almost $29 million at the time that this report had to be prepared. Reminder that it's a picture as of one specific day in time, like looking at a balance sheet. But that's the time that they have to prepare the report, similar to how a fiscal year ends, and then we take the snapshot, and that's what it is. So it did affect the long-term forecast in the report that kind of maps out future years' ADCs. Those increased. And so 1 year ago, as an example, if you were to look at the 1/1/22 report, which would have been prepared for 3/31/24 fiscal year, the forecasted ADC for our upcoming fiscal year 25 was $4,724,000. Now the actual, because that's going to be the first year in the most recent report, so it's an actual payment, is $5,575,713. That's just because of that market loss that we had in 22. So to kind of drive that home, here's the last 5 reports pulled these right from the actuarial reports, the ADCs. So for example, the top line in the report using census data from 1/1/19 at that time, so they were forecasting out about 4 or 5 years. The fiscal year 24-25 ADC they thought was going to be 5,360,000, and then 25-26 goes to 5.2. So they were projecting a downward declining ADC in that year's report. And if you go down to the next line, 1/1/20, similarly, they didn't change a whole lot. Then in 1/1/22, which was right after we had great market activity, you see a big change, 4.7, 4.2. Now that 26-27 was down from 4.9 down to 3.6. So it's kind of an example of how much these can change year by year. And of course, then 1/1/23, a year ago, we thought it was 4.7, now it's 5.5, and then they're increasing. I can come back here in a year and add on the 1/1/24, and it'll be, I'm sure, different than what they're projecting today. So there's always that risk of actual market performance not meeting the assumptions, and there's nothing we can do about that. Defined benefit pension plan. So we talk about actuarial report. Now there's the GASB report. Since 2015, this additional report is required to be prepared annually, referred to as the GASB disclosure report. This general purpose, if you remember, the actuarial's general purpose is to figure out how much you need to pay in as your ADC. General purpose of the GASB disclosure report is more for finance director and accounting positions uses along with the auditors. So we're going to use it to fulfill all of the GASB's financial accounting requirements in the audited statements. Third bullet point, used by myself as well as the third-party auditors, currently UHY, during their audit and preparation. And then what also came out around that time is the financial statements are now reporting a net pension liability that's required to be recognized on the statement of net assets. So net pension liability meaning your total pension liability or obligation less the assets you've set aside to pay that obligation, then gives you either a net pension asset if you are overfunded or a net pension liability if you're under. So this is a snapshot coming from the actuarial evaluation, most recent one, 1/1/23, showing the history of the funded status and how it can change year over year, even though we're paying what we should be paying in with the ADC. So there was a time, a few years after selling the pension obligation bonds, that we were above 100% funded and didn't have to and didn't make any ADC payments. That began in, I think, 1 or 2 years before the year, that first year that's shown on that schedule. And then you can see that 1118 report was the first time it dropped below. And now the last few years, it's been hovering around, well, about 4 years in a row, around that 90% plus or minus mark. So that funding ratio is calculated once a year based on most recent data and assumptions. And again, it's a snapshot as of that date of that year's report. There's no intent or requirement of the ADC to get you to 100% every year and to stay there. It's a long-term issue and a long-term focus and long-term payment plan. It is based on a closed amortization period, and the liability is a long-term obligation, example like a mortgage. You know you owe it, you've got a time frame to pay it. Why would you push too much into 1 year? Take advantage of the time you have to pay that. Projection is updated with each newly issued report, and payment of the required ADC annually will bring the plan to 100% funded position by the end of the amortization period. So how has the township addressed the pension liability over the years? We've said this a few times in the slides. Close the plan is the first one of those items. We've sold pension obligations in 2013. That really helped diversify the pension assets. Going back historically, if you recall, we had everything in Prudential's hands in a fixed income, low earnings vehicle. With the $80 million influx of cash, we were able to put that money to work, and it's done really well, as you've seen when Brian Green from ANCO has done his presentations. And he shows the bar chart, even with the drawdowns to pay the MIFL requirements for Prudential, we've still done really well covering that. So we've been able to keep about 40% in equities. Pension bonds were refunded for a lower interest rate in 2019, cutting it in half from 4.5% to 2.2%. Negotiated with employees in 2016 to remove the pension guarantee. I know the board's changed since then, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but that was kind of tying our hands with what we were allowed to do with the funds in that pension plan. And so that was something that was a big achievement and helps not only the township, but the employees as well. The ADC, we continue to pay that into the plan, and in more recent times added real estate investments to that portfolio. I kind of want to stop there because now I'm going to switch to OPEB to see if there's anything specifically on pension you would want me to address, or any questions.
One quick one. With OPEB right now, the goal is to get to 40%. They had put something out at the state level, state or federal, where if you were over 80%, you were considered too funded, so we didn't get help. And if you're under 80%, that was when for pensions. Is that something that still stands, where they feel that if it's 80% or higher, you're at a stable mark? Because you had mentioned, although we all want to be at 100% with the fluctuations that can happen, there's a safety net. I know we couldn't apply for grants to help with any of this because we were over 80%.
Yeah, I don't recall if it was 80, 40 or 60 is in my head, but
That
whatever
was where you
percentage
still
it
got a
was, we
little
were
bit.
over it. So yeah, they passed something,
Yeah, there were tiers, and over 80, you couldn't get anything.
some sort of funding to be able to help people with their pension plans, and at 89, we were well above qualifying. So I mean, that's good.
Yeah, it was a bummer that we didn't get anything
But,
towards
yeah,
it, but they literally said that we couldn't even apply.
Yeah.
Just because before this, obviously, I would have assumed, why wouldn't you want to be at 100 for everything? But there's, you've pointed out, one bad year in the market, and a swing comes of over $1 million or 800,000. So I think most people out there understand the market fluctuations, but just wanted to highlight that even above 80%, we weren't able to be considered in danger, or
No.
even remotely close, because there were tiers. It was under 20, it was like 20 to 80, and then the rest of us.
And we're well above, and maybe this is the percentage I'm thinking of, the similar to Retire Healthcare, PA 202, requiring you to get to that 40% minimum. We haven't really talked about it here. The other half of that is they also did on the pension plan side a 60% minimum.
Right.
But it just it hasn't been discussed here because we've been well above that 60%, and I don't see any dangers of us ever getting down to have to do the similar type of reporting we have to do on the OPEB.
And that's why the state came out with that funding option. There were so many below 60% that they didn't touch the retiree healthcare part, where a lot of us were looking for help. But on the pension part, they were trying to bring people up with some of the ARPA funding and such. So
Yeah, I was just going to say, just for people who may not be familiar with the law, as the finance director is stating, the state of Michigan has essentially set 60% as being the goal for pensions to be funded. So Bloomfield Township being above 80% is well above what the state is requiring.
Mhm.
So just to really drive that point home.
we'd love to be at 100, though.
Yeah, of course.
Jason, would you go back to slide, I think it's 13? And that deals with the ratio history. And to me, what caught my attention here, and we're gonna, we get at the quarterly Financial Sustainability Committee, we get the results of the assets. And that we have some control over in terms of how we invest, although we're invested in the market. And a good portion of that, by the way, of our assets, about 135 of that. So basically, there's 100, there is with Prudential, and that we don't really have an option. That's where we're at. It's the other 100 million that we have invested, and we have discretion over how we invest, and that's what the board does with their investment policy. The area that we really don't have any control over is the accrued liability, and that is a function of retirements. And so when you look at how that's grown, that has taken up or increased the unfunded accrued liability more so than really the stock or the equity performance. And the equity performance has significantly come up since the beginning of the year. So I would imagine, who knows what's going to happen by year end, but it fluctuates, and currently we're certainly over where we were at on 1/1/23. I guess my question is about the accrued liability, and I know we've had a lot of retirements this year. Do you see that? And so therefore, that's increased that, but I guess really that's not necessarily based just on retirements. It's just what the liability of the population is, which is what Milliman estimates on a yearly basis, correct?
Yeah, that's that. But going back to the definition of the actuary, the advanced mathematical skills using mortality tables, so they have to update those every once in a while, which you can have no change in anything else, but then a new mortality table comes out and it could have an effect.
So if I can interrupt
Go
you,
ahead.
to that end, and I guess I'd like to ask our representative from Milliman, how current are we with our actuarial tables? And is there a new actuarial table coming out anytime soon?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we are very recent. Every year we do update the mortality assumption. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that the Society of Actuaries published the Hub 2010 mortality tables, which were then updated into the report. And then every year after, they update a projection scale. And so there's a base mortality table, that public 2010 table, that is then projected forward using this projected scale. And that projection scale is updated every year based on the most recent mortality experience. And so every valuation is using the most up-to-date assumptions. And I wouldn't expect a brand new base table, which usually has the most impact on the results, for another 3 to 4 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. One other impact too is, although the plan is closed, there are still active participants, and those active participants are accruing benefits in the plan of approximately a little over 2 million. And so we would expect the liability to continue to increase slightly year over year until that starts to fall off a little bit further.
Thank you.
Questions?
So
Go ahead.
So the increase in the liability of about 60 million is because people were accruing more benefit. That's the word to use. Benefit because they were actively working. But since then it's slowed because we don't have as many active people working, accruing more benefit. Is that correct?
That's partially correct. I'd have to look back and see what interest rate assumption was used at the beginning of this table. I have a feeling that currently the liability is calculated using a 6% interest rate. I have a feeling that the interest rate used in the years at the beginning of this table is slightly higher, which a higher interest rate calculates a lower present value. And so that assumption has changed. Right now, there's a pretty conservative interest rate of 6% that is being used for the present value. So that is also having a fairly significant impact on the liabilities shown in this analysis.
And how and why does that change?
That discount rate is based on the expected return of assets on the portfolio that's dedicated to these liabilities. And so we mentioned before with the Prudential being half of that, as well as just other asset allocation classes used in this portfolio. So that's something that we do review annually to determine, based on the current asset allocation, what is the expected return on assets of this portfolio.
Thank you.
I just quickly wanted to kind of confirm what I'm thinking, and maybe at the risk of stating the obvious.
Okay.
I mean, these actuarial tables are about our long-term financial funding plans to ensure solvency and to have predictable contributions over time. It has nothing to do with actual benefits. So if we're 89% funded, people are still getting 100% of their pension, no matter which union they were in or when they retired. They're getting all that was promised, always have, and our commitment is always will be. These funding numbers are just for our financial planning to ensure that over the long term we deliver on that promise without having to have a huge surprise bump in payments in a given year, to the extent we can avoid it. I mean, big investment losses, if the market goes down, obviously causes us to pay more because we're ensuring that there's long-term financial stability. The fluctuations from year to year are just not connected at all. The idea of benefits. I mean, no one's getting less. No one's, we're always going to fulfill those commitments. And this is part of our job to do that, to ensure that we have actuarially determined plans, we have ADC, we meet the ADC. Right? So just I want to make sure there's people understand that this isn't talking about how no one's affected by the fact that our percent funded ratio, when talking about no one being actual retiree or soon to be retiree, no one's impacted by these changes. This is just for our own fiscal planning purposes. People are still getting their pensions as promised.
Yeah, those benefit plans as written have not changed. And they're closed plans, so that they're not a factor of negotiation. It's under the pension bonds as well, which is another reason they're not being changed.
When whether one account has X dollars in it or one account has X plus one, they're still both getting their benefits that were promised.
Right. The only thing that would change is assumptions to actual. So the actuary is making assumptions of at what age will employee A, B, C, D retire, and then how long will they draw on that plan if they retire at that age.
Right.
So those are all the things that come into play after that can change year by year, but
would just impact our financial planning and the amount of our contributions, not impacting anybody's benefits whatsoever.
correct.
Like, for example, the public safety, they're not being shorted or anything at all. They've always been paid, but is that also maybe where some misunderstandings happen? You highlighted it where the census data is where it stays in the plan. So if somebody sees that some plans have more and some have less, it's because it depends on how many are actually in the plan in that department. For example, like cable, there's not that many employees. There's not that many that are in the plan. Versus public safety, there's a lot of employees. There's a lot in the plan, so there's more fluctuation. There's different numbers. Am I reading this correctly that you don't move it from plan, you don't take from public safety, put in cable, it's based off the number of people, where it came from is where it stays?
Referencing how we charge out the ADC payment?
Right, where it says like the contribution for the next year's ADC, you specifically mentioned that it's allocated based on the census data of the plan, so it's where the department they worked, so it's not like you're moving stuff from public safety to other ones because it's public safety stuff, it stays with public safety.
Yep.
And then to Martin's point, nobody's getting shorted because anybody actually needing payments or getting payments, these are for future.
Right.
Right.
And there's a page in the Milliman valuation where those percentages are provided to me to use based on the census data of how much is fire, how much is from police, how much is all across all the departments that have employees on that plan, whether they're retired or active.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions on the pension part?
No, I think an interesting way to look at what Martin was asking is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the 89% is kind of like the lottery. Like if you were to try and pay out everybody in a lump sum, you could only meet 89% of the lump sum. It doesn't mean anybody's getting shorted. Because I know like when my husband retired, he had a itty bitty pension and they were underfunded. And they said, well, normally we could offer you to take a buyout, a lump sum of more, but they were underfunded. So they said, you can take up to 10% now, and these will be your payments, or you can take nothing. But I guess in the past, when pension funds were in better shape, they might have offered a larger percentage of a lump sum. You know, like if you felt like you weren't going to live very long, or you just wanted, to make sure it was going to be there. I don't know why you'd take more early, but and that was something that he went through, that it was like a choice of you could take 10% up front and lower your payment, or you get your payment. And then I'm sure that all has to do with how the plan is written and offered.
So I probably should have clarified. So the ADC, so taking a step back, the disbursements to the pensioners come directly out of the trust. And I want to say, if you look at the audit financials, I think disbursements are 10 or 12 million a year. Does that sound right, Brian? So the ADC is just what we have to contribute based on the actuarial assumptions in the current year, on top of earning the 6% and the other changes to keep us on track to stay funded enough in the plan. I couldn't tell if you were thinking the ADC was actually to cover the payments going to the.
No,
They're
okay.
two different
No,
things.
yeah, just the percent that were funded overall affects, like Martin said, it doesn't, just so people understand, it doesn't short anybody. It just is a guidepost.
Financial planning tool.
Exactly.
But with your question of if everybody were to claim it today,
Do we have a lump
that's
sum
not the
option?
89% that you're
I
talking
know.
about.
We don't have a lump sum
Not with
option.
that
Right.
prudential piece in there.
Yeah, so it's a little bit
Different.
Yeah, private pension plans are very different.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of these companies went bankrupt, and then everybody, had to go to the federal government and get a haircut. It's a really different situation.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you, Jason.
I would just add your slide 11, which is really the most telling in terms of all the fluctuations on a yearly basis. And again, this really shows that it's not as much of a science as it's more of an art. And it's staying with the program. Milliman calculates this annually, but it's going to be a number of different variables. And as long as we know we're within a range of those variables, I guess that's why I asked the question about updating, because that, I remember a few years ago, that really did throw some cold water on what we were doing, because all of a sudden there was a mortality table that was adjusted and we couldn't do anything good or bad about it, and were affected by it. So with continuity, this helps us plan in terms of budget, but you start going out from 24, 25 to 28, 29, and you can just look at the ranges all through it. And next year, it'll be interesting to, when you add another column here, or row for 24, just to see how different that becomes. Again, if the market just stays the same, it should be significantly different. However, where we're at for 24, 25 is a fixed number. That is going to be contributed, and it's significantly more than where we were in 21 and 22. So it definitely has an effect, and over time it smooths out. And I think, as Jason said almost in the beginning of this, as we start, this sunsets in 60, 70 years, when you think about how long this can go on for, and at a certain point in time, this will come out to zero. And as you start getting closer to that period of time where some of the last survivors of this plan are, we'll be much closer to having an actual number and consistency during the time. But at this point, every year's juggling various estimates and then smoothing them out over time. So it's very telling. I think this one and the other 13 are great to just kind of show over time and maybe update so that everyone can see that what's happening on a yearly basis. But thank you. Great presentation.
On to part 2. OPEB, retiree healthcare. So that is retiree benefits other than pensions. So retiree healthcare. Most people, when they say defined benefit, people think by default pension, but retiree healthcare in this case is also a defined benefit plan. You're defining that they will receive this benefit of certain value or parameters upon retirement. And so upon retirement, and other requirements such as age, an employee with this benefit receives healthcare coverage for themselves and if there are eligible spouse or dependents. Why do we have that plan? Very similar to the pension, very common for careers in public service. And this one as well, there are still many municipalities that offer this to new hires. Negotiated through contracts. We closed it in 2011 to new hires. And so those hires since then are enrolled in a retirement health savings plan, which is also like the 401A, a defined contribution plan. What drives this healthcare liability and funding percentage? Mostly driven by actual healthcare costs. along with the actuary's assumptions of future costs. Unfunded liability can be affected by the liability changing, the value of the trust assets growing or declining based on market performance, similar to the pension. Retiree health care was always paid by the township on a pay-as-you-go basis, and many other municipalities did it the same way, which means paying for all the retirees that have that benefit, just like active employees. We're paying the monthly bill of providing that, but we weren't necessarily putting away funds on top of the actual costs. No additional funding was required. There was never a ADC requirement at the state level for us, similar to the pension. So it was pay as you go. The trust did have a minimal balance before 2012. And then from 2012 over the next decade, the township has contributed over $17.5 million into that. Those trust assets are held in 5 separate investment portfolios. And we have the third-party actuary Milliman. This actuarial report is done every 2 years. It's not necessary to have it done annually for the amount of work it takes and the change. It's less of a change year to year. But the separate GASB reports are a required annual, again, because those have to be used in the annual audit. What changes have occurred to reporting and funding requirements in recent years? In 2015, GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, expanded, similar to pension, they expanded reporting and financial disclosures for retiree health care. They always phase those in based on how your fiscal year comes into play. So that was effective for the township in 2018, with the most notable change being showing the net retiree health care liability on the face of the government-wide financial statements, where in the past it was only disclosed as a footnote. We also had PA 202 of 2017, we've talked a little bit about earlier, that requires additional reporting requirements and mandates plan requirements for any municipality that hasn't closed their 2 plans. We're not subject to that part of the law. The township was determined to be underfunded for retiree health care, being below their 40% minimum. At the time the law came out, we were at 3.45%. Must be at least 40% funded by the year 2047, because they gave you 30 years from the enactment of the law. So what is an OPEB actuarial report? Again, prepared every 2 years. General purpose is determine a recommendation of contribution for the next fiscal year. Reviews how the plan is performing compared to assumptions. Updates projections of future year funding levels. And any contributions paid into the trust from our various township budgets are allocated to the correlating asset portfolio for that group of employees and retirees. So the example here is the Water and Sewer Fund has its own asset portfolio in the OPEB trust. You would also find an OPEB expense in their financials, and so they pay that money in. It goes into the Water and Sewer Fund asset portfolio for the employees and retirees of that Water and Sewer Fund. GASB reports since 2018. These additional reports are required to be prepared annually, similar to the pension. There are 5 because we have 5 separate portfolios. This makes it easier to reconcile between the various reports on our end. I think it's a little more work on the actuaries and our investment advisors. The general purpose is to assist the township in fulfilling its accounting requirements. And just like there's a net pension liability on the statement of net position, we have a net OPEB liability that's reported. Similar schedule in that we looked at on the pension. This one's coming from the most recent OPEB actuarial evaluation, which again, because we're on an every other year, the most recent is as of April 1, 2022 for fiscal year 3/31/24. So back in 13, 1.1% funded. April 1 of 22, 22.8% funded. So that's what, over 20 times in 10 years. I think that's a pretty good drop in the bucket for where we started.
Can I make a comment here,
Yeah.
Jason? You know, it's kind of interesting. We and I'm going back to the you know, our liability was always our liability. And that may sound odd, but it didn't necessarily show up in the financial statement. It wasn't until, what do we have, 2000, was it 15? 2015, it was in the footnotes, and then 18, it was actually in the actual statement. And all along, this liability existed, whether it was on the financial statement or not. This is the liability that was accruing and existed. And then in 15, it was showing up in a footnote, still not on the base of the financial statement, so it never really showed up in terms of the net assets or net liability of net worth of the township, so to speak. And then in 17, the state required, I think rightly so, certain funding levels. I think it's really important to say that throughout this period, the township was always paying what it was owing. I agree that there should have been some kind of standard, and I didn't necessarily disagree, and not that it made a difference, but when Governor Snyder in 17, when they enacted PA 202, I think the only thing that was an issue for the township was because we were 100% paying, we were completely compliant, it never gave us an ability to transition into what was required and what was now newly required with one act. And all of a sudden, we came out to be in a non-compliant and people comparing us to other communities that weren't very well funded. The reason I'm bringing this up now is once that became an issue, and in 18, 17, and 18, we as a township said, okay, if we need to put money towards this, and it's not just our AAA and strength of the township, knowing that we're always going to fund it. If it needs to be in a fund, then we'll fund it. And we've increased, from basically 4% in 16 to almost 23%. So once it became something that we saw was an issue, and it was being, we acted immediately and started funding significantly. And we're well on our way to being at the minimum requirement of what the state requires. So I think we've done really well. We clearly have more to go, but I think it really shows as a community, once we put our mind to something, that we'll get there. I think this also, just in looking at our credit rating and ratings with the different credit agencies, this is one that prevents us at this point from getting to AAA with Moody's, because their comment is that AAA rating is really rarefied air, and they compared us to basically a Rolls Royce with one maybe missing hubcap or rusted hubcap. And this is the area where as robust and strong as everything else is, they had difficulty putting us in a AAA, increasing us to AAA because of this one factor. So actually, if you even look at, if we put all of our capital and equipment reserve into this into OPEB, we could basically increase this by the actuarial value of the assets by 50%, And we very well could be at, close to, well, we'd be at 30, so we'd
Probably about
be
32%.
32%, and we very quickly get to that 40%. Then it's just a function of, what do we as a community want to do, and is that really the best place that we see putting our money? But again, before any of this came to be showing on the financial statement, this is basically within the last, 7 to 8 years. We were basically at 1.1%. We were AAA, and everyone kind of changed their reporting requirements, and we were out there doing what we'd always done, which was good and strong, except that the criteria changed around us. And again, we could probably get there if we wanted to, but that's just a function of what the board wants to do. So.
And you pointed out that they changed the way they did. Even if we got to this, they've set another obstacle with SADs where we want to. I mean,
That's
we're
a
not
whole
going to
different-
not
yeah.
right, but even still,
Yeah.
they keep setting obstacles to the AAA.
And that's just Moody's. I mean,
Yeah.
Standard and
They're
Poor.
moody.
Their comment was at the end of at the end of the presentation was, what we're doing is awesome. So,
Yeah.
it's just different credit rating agencies have different ways of looking at things.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you. Couldn't
Jeez.
help myself.
It's all right. It's your last meeting, so.
Thank you.
Jason, you might answer this in one of the coming slides, and if so, I apologize for interrupting you. Why did we have to break out the OPEB trust by fund type when we don't have to do that for pension?
Let's revisit that in a few. Remind me if I don't cover it. We're kind of going to get there in a little bit. Okay.
My next question's on the next slide, so I'll shush.
Okay. PA 202, so no intent or requirement for the funded ratio to get there or remain at 100%. Again, it's a long-term liability, long-term growth, long-term plan. Township continues to budget contributions from the general fund and public safety fund. So those two combined, we've been on a kind of a plan to do 1.25 million a year. For note though, for fiscal year 23-24, we're able to increase that this current budget year to 1.75 million. Water and sewer fund, a little different. They contribute based on the actuarial report. Again, that's a very different plan, different fund. It's a full accrual. It's treated differently and reported differently than the governmental funds. There is a state requirement that our OPEB plan be a minimum of 40% funded by 2048 is the year. So that's 30 years from law enactment. And our most recent corrective action plan filed with the state with all the documentation illustrates that our OPEB plan could be 40% funded, that minimum, by 2032. So that's only 9 years away, and possibly 100% funded 10 years after that. So at least at this point, we are well on track to exceed the minimum by the end date of that.
It looks like we're actually on track to hit 100% before the end date.
Yeah,
Six
well
years
exceeding.
prior
Yep.
to the end date.
Yep.
It's not small. That was my next question, was when will we hit 100%? Because I thought it was before that end date, so it's good to see.
No, this is a little small, but so this is a page from the healthcare evaluation showing a long-range forecast, and that's the curve. So this is one of the documents we include when we report our PA 202 reporting to the state. So that right about in the middle is 2032, and the projection is 45.4%. And then right at the far right side, 2042, it's at 98.6% as of the April 1, 22. So we'll watch when we get the April 1, 2024 next year, next summer, and see where we go, where the updated chart is on that. How has the township addressed retiree healthcare liability? Closed the plan to new hires in 2011. We've negotiated various changes to the benefits with employees and union groups over the past 3+ decades. Some of those listed here. There's more, but these I think were the biggest and ones I could recall. Plan structure changes. I mean, you go way back and we had HMO plans. We transitioned those to PPOs. Then we went to the HRA, and then most recently the HSA. Moved from copay-based plans to consumer-driven healthcare. The prescription requirements, mandatory generic. In more recent years, we've changed the Medicare plan structure. So even those that are on the retiree healthcare defined benefit plan, when they get to Medicare age, our plan becomes secondary and Medicare is primary. So once they get to that 65 mark, we get quite a bit of savings for the rest of their time. The increased cost sharing on employees' side, and 3 years ago now, 1 of 20, I think we went to the self-funding, which has been phenomenal, to say the least, on getting rid of lots of fees that we had to pay just for having an insured plan, and is doing really well. So we fund the trust on an annual basis per the corrective action plan and as the budget allows, contributing extra funds whenever feasible. And that's why from 2012 or 13 to 20 to current year, you've seen those assets, not only from market performance, but from all those years where we have, instead of letting surpluses, I'll call them, in our operating budgets close into already pretty healthy fund balances, we've taken that money and put it against this liability, towards this liability. So I really like this chart, this line chart. So focus first on the blue line at the top. So in 2014, you'll see that jump. That was the actuary changed their assumptions on the discount rate and the medical inflation rate, dramatically increasing the liability. Then it's was level, then it grew, and then you see in 2019, there's been some lowering from the actuary to the medical inflation rate, as well as increasing the discount rate to reflect the township's funding policy. So being able to see that we're committed to 1.25 million or more on an annual basis to be of new cash to be input into that trust. Then if you look at I'll call it the orange, well, it's kind of a yellow, that second line that's going upward, or no, the orange line at the bottom, that ends at 22 million. That's the assets. So in 2010, there was about $137,000. 13 years later, it's just shy of 23 million. The yellow line kind of going up across the middle and then crossing the blue line, that's the funding percentage, which has increased significantly because you have the liability coming down and you have the assets growing and new contributions being made. So that's how we're getting that growth in the funding percentage. Healthcare contributions and asset portfolios. There was a trust established in 2005 for all eligible employees. In the beginning, the only funds contributed to the trust were minimal, and they came from the general fund. As contributions started to be received from other sources outside of the general fund, it was recommended to establish separate accounts for those assets. So going through the history, we have currently 5 separate accounts or portfolios. General, in 2015, we established water and sewer. 2017, building inspection and cable studio. And most recently, in 2021, public safety. This table shows kind of a snapshot along the far left column is each one of those funds. Number of participants that have this benefit in each one of those funds. So the trust as a whole has just over 500, with the majority, over half of them are in the public safety fund. You only have a handful in cable. Next largest, of course, under public safety is general. Then the next column over, you have total liability by each one of those, then totaling the trust as a whole at the bottom. Assets, next column over, then they're individual. If you were to look at them on an individual basis, the percent funded. And then far right, total contributions to date. Percent funded. So while we have each of these portfolios separated, you still should try to focus on the bottom line trust as a whole. That's what's reported in the audit financials. That's what the state cares about when they are looking at your corrective action plan and your PA 202 requirements. So I would focus less on how one section is doing versus another. There's no reason they should be equal or comparable in any way. You can see their populations and their liabilities are completely different and separate from one another. I will point out the little blue star next to the general fund, 5.9 million, with that footnote. I'll read that in case that's too small. So total assets are less than the total contributions to date because in 2021, a portion of the accumulated asset balance was transferred to the public safety portfolio based on calculations prepared by Milliman.
And then, again, we always have them as our third party. Just if you could comment on that, do you agree with Jason's assessment that you look at the trust as a whole?
For Jack?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So always look at it as trust as a whole. The allocations really don't matter until, the end game.
I just want to make sure because, sometimes if somebody doesn't trust us and they say third party, it's always good to have the third party reassure that that is the way we should all be looking at it.
Yep, for sure.
A quick follow-up to that, then just a little more background as to why the separate funds were created. If we're looking at the general line, what's the...
So I tried going back to, I believe it goes back to board discussions, and I couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but I think it goes back to water and sewer, because that was the first time and there was resolutions and discussions at the board level and other levels of making sure that with that being a non-tax fund and having bolts and the other things, and I don't know if we were quite into that lawsuit yet at that point, but making sure if the water and sewer fund contributed dollars, which we had never set aside, we had it included in rates, but had never actually put that money and locked it into a trust where it could be reported as locked in for OPEB liability, that there wouldn't be any chance that anyone could say we use that water and sewer money for non-water and sewer fund expenses. I think that's where it started. And then just a couple years later, we had the building inspection and cable studio, which also never put away any money for their share of their retirees and employees' liability. So I think then it was just, well, we did it with water and sewer. Let's stay consistent and follow suit with these two, which also are tax generating. You got permit fees are the main revenue of building inspection, and cable studio is PEG fees and franchise fees. And
Can you give me a little background too as to how Milliman came up with these numbers? I mean, we didn't come up with the numbers, how that be done. Our actuary, did a report and said, this is how the funds should be broken out.
so I think I have that. I think
Okay.
I expand on that on another.
I'll wait. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure I've got it.
And before we move on, I just have a couple of questions about this chart. So the water, sewer, building, and cable studio, those contributions all came directly from those specific departments.
Yes.
Okay. So for water and sewer, you indicated that historically when we were setting the rates, or when the township, when the board was setting the rates, they were taking into consideration the water and sewer employees and the fact that they would have this liability in the future, and that was being factored into the rate, right?
Correct.
Okay, so now we see that we are 102%, almost 103% funded.
Mhm.
So in theory, going forward, when the board is setting the rate, now they can take that out as a consideration.
Cut it back.
Well, maybe, because I guess, okay, because then
Maybe
to
cut
take a
it
step back, so this money is also invested, right?
Yes.
Okay, so today it's at 103%, but that could go down if the market drops.
Well, yeah. So as of 5 months ago, as of March 31, it was 100, and so today it could be below 100.
Okay. Okay, that's all for now, thank you.
Okay. So general, this is where everything began. It had $137,000. I tried to go back. I believe it was a maturity of a T-bill way back when, and it was the first deposit being assigned to that OPEB trust. The voluntary contributions were deposited here whenever the township operating funds had a surplus in lieu of increasing fund balance of the general fund. While the general fund being the only contributor, with the general fund being the only contributor and a relatively minimal amount of assets, this is where all eligible employees and retirees were represented. So we didn't look at it back then as just general funds liability. It was all liability. It now represents all other eligible employees and retirees that are not represented by one of the other 4 portfolios. So again, we now have water and sewer, building inspection, cable, and public safety. And the general fund did not contribute towards retiree healthcare liabilities of water and sewer, building inspection, or cable. Those assets came from those funds.
And actually, as you're saying that, I thought of another question that I had for the prior slide. So because that money came from those funds, we would never, so like even though cable studio is at 160% funded, we can't take that money out of cable studio to put it into public safety because the money came from the cable fund.
So I posed that question to our labor council, that scenario, and I used cable studio because it's the smallest and it's the largest funding percentage at this point. And a little surprising, but not completely, because if you go back to what we were talking about of looking at the OPEB trust as a whole, if in whatever year, 30 years from now, the last person that has that retiree benefit in cable passes away and there's $200,000 left, at least his response now is that has to stay in that trust. It's part of your overall OPEB liability and overall OPEB assets, as opposed to taking it out and then,
But you could move, once that last person's gone, you could move it to one of the others.
it would be, yeah.
It's still part of the
it's
trust.
It's still your total OPEB assets and total OPEB liability.
So it can't go to the general fund, but it does go to other
Retiree
Stay-
retiree healthcare
in the
contributions.
It's got to stay in the trust.
In the trust.
Yeah, it wouldn't come back to our budgets or.
Yeah, it has to stay in the OPEB trust to
Yep.
pay OPEB liability, whatever department it comes from.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, I don't know yet what happens way down the road when it's the very last person in the
Sure.
trust. If there's funds left, then what happens?
Well, so
All
Jason,
shouldn't
gone
be.
by
There
then.
shouldn't be.
Say-
The actuarial
Only
determination will just
well,
make it exactly
probably
right.
might be.
so Jason, back to the
Wasn't
cable
so-
studio fund, only because that's the one that's the most disproportionate. Do you have any kind of an explanation, like how did we get 160% funded? Is that because the employees are all current and there's no one maybe drawing right now because it didn't exist? So there's nobody been retired off of it or nobody that stayed long enough to be, I mean, how would you get that high?
So if you go back to if you were to look back to the reports when we made that contribution, we did a one-time contribution for building, inspection, and cable out of their fund balances. And that was based on the data and actuarial reports we had at that time. And if you look back, maybe I can,
Because you had built that into the rates, so there,
so
you were
our-
putting in what was supposed to be there already.
going back to like 2017, our liability overall was 144 million, whereas today it's below 108 million. So, and we had this track record of it having these big increases going up. So at least at that point, I wasn't foreseeing $45 million decrease in the liability. I don't know if anyone was. So for cable to contribute 1.3 million at that time, they weren't 100% funded. That didn't, they were still under. But with everyone's liability, the trust as a whole liability, which means all those got a piece of that going down, and then 2021, 22 market performance, and even part of 23, that you've closed that liabilities come down and assets have grown, and so right now you have what seems to be an overfunding. But again, what happens in 5 years from now? It's going to keep.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is where I was at.
Mhm.
So general fund will contribute 350,000 during this fiscal year, and that's included in the budget. Water and sewer, 2015, the board approved transferring water and sewer funds of 2.7 million to the OPEB trust. That was pursuant to opinions received from UHY auditors, Milliman actuaries, and attorneys at both Seacrest Wardle and Clark Hill. The enterprise fund, again, is different. It's full accrual basis, different accounting rules. There is a annual OPEB expense. The annual amounts for the retiree health care are included in development of water and sewer rates. So we're collecting that money and then we're turning around each year and putting it into the trust.
Again, that came out of their overage fund, or their reserve fund. That didn't come from the general fund.
Correct. It was prudent to transfer the dollars that were collected from the ratepayers for retiree health care to an asset portfolio within the trust. And this did have an effect on the very next actuarial report that was released, as that asset influx of 2.7 million was now able to be counted towards their liability. It is an enterprise fund with different accounting rules, as well as being a non-tax fund. So we kind of covered this in the discussion a few minutes ago. The contributions were recommended to be kept in a separate asset portfolio and not commingled, just to be very clear that there's no mishandling there. Since the initial deposit, the Water and Sewer Fund has contributed an additional $1,864,165 Building inspection, 2017, Township Board approved transferring funds of $1.8 million to the OPEB trust. That came from the building inspection fund, and it reduced its accumulated fund balance. The fund had never previously contributed towards its liability. Even though it's a special revenue fund and not a true enterprise fund, it was recommended again to deposit it in its own asset portfolio within the trust. And since that initial deposit, there have been no additional funds contributed from the building inspection fund or from any other fund towards its liability. Cable studio is real similar. It was done at the same time. Different dollar amount was $1.3 million. Same story, came from cable studio fund and its fund balance. It's for its liability that it never contributed towards in the past. And again, special revenue fund, but was to be treated the same way. And there have been no additional funds contributed since then. And then the most recent, public safety, 2021, following suit, creating a separate asset portfolio. Public safety fund made its first contribution towards retiree health care in fiscal year ending March 31, 20. Actuaries at Milliman assisted in determining the amount of $6,286,377 to be transferred from the existing general portfolio, asset portfolio, to the new public safety asset portfolio. So hopefully this addresses where Martin was getting. So the market value of the assets allocated to police and fire in the April 1, 2020 actuarial report was $4,786,377. Plus the 2020-2021 fiscal year contribution that came directly from the public safety fund, not the general fund, of $1.5 million. Those two numbers added together is how we come to that reallocation of assets from the general fund to the public safety fund of $6,286,377. Since that cumulative transfer, the public safety fund has contributed an additional $1.5 million, and in the current fiscal year ending March 31, 24, is budgeted and will contribute $1.4 million. Future contributions, as part of our corrective action plan, we're on track to continue $1.25 million a year. That's being budgeted from both general and public safety fund. The amount is split based on recent actuarial reports, so about 20% from general fund and 80% from public safety. If you think back to that table, it's about how that liability is split.
And that's on top of paying current expenses.
That's on top, yeah, that's just new money going in the trust. We are still paying for the current monthly costs of all of the retirees out of each budget. So 2024, total contribution of 1.75. Water and sewer, still based on actuarial. And building inspection and cable, still don't need to contribute. They're still well above the 100%. On the disbursement side, we've never really talked about, so I just briefly, because it's still way in the future, I believe, where we're going to ever begin drawing down from the trust. So actuarial reports are both a snapshot as of a specific day and a projection of future years by applying assumptions. Liabilities long-term, so we got to be careful not to make decisions and actions based on a short-term view. While some of the populations like cable are smaller and right now are near or above 100% funded, let's look at the trust as a whole being 22.6% funded. The asset values are a big determinant, and they're determined by the market, so that liability will be directly affected by healthcare costs and trends, and both of these are going to move up and down from year to year. So in my mind, the OPEB plan is still in a growth and accumulation phase. One day we will, with the guidance of actuaries, attorneys, and auditors, the OPEB plan will be at a point where whoever's here at that time will be discussing how and when and to what extent to start drawing down those assets, similar to how the pension trust has payments coming out of it. We're still having to fund it also on the other side, but it'll be a reprieve for the operating budgets once that expense is lifted. So the actuary, I think, would be likely be the one to begin those discussions. Again, we're talking years and years down the road. It likely wouldn't occur until the trust was at least 80% funded overall, not just one piece. And otherwise, there would have to be offsetting contributions. So if we start taking money out of there, you're just spinning your wheels, because then you're going to have to pay more in on the other side to keep that funded ratio going up. So there are two methods. I talked to Jack at Milliman, as well as our auditors and labor attorney, trying to get a solid answer on this. But basically, the trust, when it's ready to start making disbursements for retiree healthcare costs, there are two methods that could be utilized. One, and these aren't in any specific order, but one way is the trust pays the retiree healthcare invoices directly, similar to how the DB pension plan is administered. Or second, the township pays the retiree healthcare invoices like it always has through the budgets, but then receives a reimbursement from the trust. Again, it's many years down the road, but if it were up to me, I would prefer the first option, having it, because there's no way to claim that you didn't use the money the way it should be if it's coming directly from the trust and never comes back into the township's hands. It's very clearly being used for what it was intended to, and there's no chance for any confusion there. For now, we will continue budgeting for and paying for the healthcare expenses through the annual budgets of the departments. I'll take any more questions. I know it was long, but
Very helpful.
No, thank you.
Good,
Thank you.
I have a question, actually. Is it Jack? For Jack?
yes.
So Jack, after you've seen this presentation and you've seen our plan, our strategy, and where we're going, is this you as a third party, something that you would feel that we're on the right track and there's not any reason to worry? Basically just third party view of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think from a pension perspective, being right around that 90% funded, I think that's great, and continue to monitor that every year. From an OPEB perspective, going from 1% funded up to over 20% funded over the last couple of years, and continuing to fund an amount above what's needed for payments every year is a great approach. And as Jason mentioned, as the funded percentage continues to improve, at that point, we'll start looking at, does the 1.25 million every year make sense? When can we start paying benefits out of that trust? And that's a conversation, obviously, it'll be a ways down the road, but I think currently the approach is really solid.
Does anyone else have questions for Jason or Jack?
I actually have a question for Jack. Well, I guess Jack maybe and Jason. It's been, I don't know, the public safety is what, 9, what's the number?
Thank you.
9.9 or something? 9.95, just under, roughly 10%. First of all, the liability, and I guess this is really for Jason, the liability to pay whether it's a firefighter, whether it's a water fund, or whether it's a cable. Who is behind the commitment to pay a retiree's healthcare costs? Is it the fund? Or is it the township, I guess?
Well, my answer was going to be the township.
Okay.
Because the township is the fund.
So, well, I just want to be very clear that, again, we have a fund, the biggest fund, that is 327 participants. That is a little less than 10%, call it 10%. And it's been represented that we're basically shirting, drifting the public safety to these other funds. And I guess I just want to be very clear that putting all of this aside, it's the township's liability to pay it's the township's responsibility to pay the liability. This is a mechanism to pay the liability, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Jack, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And at the end of the day, again, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and we have a long way to get there. It would seem to me the fund that's going to grow the quickest, because 80% of our money is going into the fund, it's going to be the public safety fund. So on a yearly basis, is that what, Jack, you would expect to see grow the quickest now? Is the money is where we'll put 80% of our funding? Obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the end of the day, if we have one fund that has significant assets, one of these sub-funds basically of the general trust, and there is another fund that is short, what would happen?
I believe it goes back to the scenario I gave with cable. It's part of the OPEB. It's still part of the OPEB overall trust assets.
Okay.
It would come from one of them.
And again, I guess you've made this comment, but I just think it needs to be really emphasized once, twice, or three times or more, that when we're looking at a fund that is 160% funded, a fund that's 136% funded, we're talking about 17 employees out of 503 people that are covered. So we're talking about what, 3%, 4%, less than 3.5% of the assets, or of the that is being covered by, and the lion's share of the liability is with the majority, which is public safety. And I think it is just disingenuous for anyone to claim that public safety is not being funded. If you need some water, go get it, but don't cough and hear that. Again, to stand in front of this community and state that that this township board is in any way doing anything less than being 100% above board with public safety, I just think is either not understanding the subject, is being disingenuous, or just outright, I don't know what you'd call it. Especially when this is really in a growth stage. We have a long way to go. I guess if we really wanted to decrease some of these, we could start paying out of this fund right now. I'm not suggesting it at all, because again, who knows what the future brings, but it could be right-sized. It's just not the right thing to do. But for, this is extremely, I hand it to you, Jason. This isn't the first time you've mastered putting very difficult concepts. I would suggest that healthcare and pension funding is probably amongst the most complicated financial items that are expressed, and you've done it expertly here. You've taken us, the township, through some very trying times where, again, we were doing what was required by the law. We were 100% of doing what was required. And then the requirements started changing, and as the requirements have changed, this township has acted promptly, diligently, and again, we've gone from complying by paying 100% to now we're paying 100%, we're funding for the future, we're paying currently. So when you look at both the pension liability and the healthcare liability, remember right now we're paying current employees' healthcare costs, we're paying retiree healthcare costs, and we're paying future retiree healthcare costs with the defined contribution. So we're really paying triple of what these costs are, and we're doing it well, and we're still and we're complying and we're getting there. So I think, number one, you've explained it very well, and like everything you do, you've taken really a long-term view for the township and taken what the requirements are and then put us in a position to be able to do exceedingly well as we go. So my hat's off to you, and you've done an incredible job. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Well
mean,
deserved.
I agree. Great presentation. And I guess just one other thing that I think is important for residents to understand is when we're talking about OPEB and the cost of healthcare, we're dealing with so many uncertain variables. So a lot of this is, to Treasurer Kepes' point, looking ahead, doing, proper financial planning to make sure that the township stays in the, top position that it's always been in. We don't know how long people are going to live. We don't know what the cost of healthcare is going to be. And really all we can do is, which I also would like to applaud this board for going what I think is above and beyond to say, we're going to contribute this amount of money to ensure that when the time comes, 50, 60 years from now, when the money is needed, it's going to be there. And we don't have a situation like, the city of Detroit where you have to file for bankruptcy because you're not able to pay your pension obligation. So, of course, I would like us to be much, much closer to where we are with the pension. But as was stated, we are in the building phase now. And I think we've set a really good foundation. And my hope is that we can continue to build on what we've already done. And I look forward to meeting the deadlines or, much ahead of what the state of Michigan has put in place by law. And I look forward to that time. So thank you.
Yeah, the Trustee Faki and Treasurer Kepes actually said a lot of what I was going to say, especially about that we're paying for current retirees, future retirees, and active future retirees at the same time. And, some people have said to me, well, why are we today, taxpayers today, paying that when it wasn't paid 20 years ago or 30 years ago? And I said, well, we can sit there and pout about it, or we can do the right thing. And so even though the law changed regarding OPEB in 2017, took effect 2018, 2019, the chart that you showed that this board, not this board, our predecessors on this board were, forward thinking enough to start funding the OPEB trust before it became, an actual legal requirement to do so. So, in addition to you, Jason, for all the work that you've done to keep us, pushing forward on this, my hat's off to Treasurer Kepes, Trustee Barnett, who've been around and were around when that changed. Because they said, hey, we could just keep paying as we go, like we have done for 30 years, but that's not the right thing to do. And so I applaud you guys.
Great presentation as always. And like Brian said, you have a way of taking difficult concepts that some people just have a very difficult time understanding and making them understandable. And I certainly want to applaud you also for bringing out the change that we made several years ago in the healthcare approach, which has brought in basically $1 million a year that previously wasn't there.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and really was a great approach, and look forward also to funding as much as we can moving forward and not having to take a slower approach. But I'm glad that we're moving in the right direction. And again, thank you for the way that you explained it.
Thank you.
I do also want to thank the board to piggyback on what Trustee Faki said. You all here have not only said that you would do what we're supposed to do, but you'll go above and beyond. When we came to you and said, hey, we have some extra, could we put it towards this? That was 100% of this board said yes. So that's why I think that we'll get there even faster than expected, not just what you've presented, but I'm sure if we have others, we've now started putting into the capital fund and to this board has definitely shown that, like Brian said as well, if there's something we need to do, we'll do it. And I just want to also thank Jack for being here too, because again, I have faith in what you're saying. We have faith in what you're saying. For those that don't fully understand and have asked for a third party, we now even have a third party here to say they trust what you're saying. So at some point, to Brian's point, people can make any comments they want, but just because they say it doesn't make it true. And I'm just thankful that you were here to show everybody the truth.
No problem. And Jason, you did a great job. I'll echo what everybody else said.
I sometimes forget he's up there.
It's like he's listening.
Thanks for your time tonight, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome, everybody. Have a great evening.
You too.
Good night. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jay.
So, well, since I'm up here, I just wanted to say, Brian, it's been a pleasure. I'll miss our daily talks, whether they're business, investments, township, or even non-township subjects. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll miss them all.
So next, we're going to go on to considering the relocation of Precinct 6 polling location from 1020 East Square Lake Road, the International Academy, to 2800 Kensington Road, presently East Hills Middle School, soon to become Eastover Elementary School. So presented by Clerk Brooke.
Great, thanks. Supervisor Walsh, there are 3 items here and quick introduction to those. The Bloomfield Hills School District has always been a meaningful and critical partner to our holding elections here in the township. These 3 are school district precinct polling locations, and the school district Bloomfield Hills, including Birmingham, but we're talking about Bloomfield Hills in particular right now, will continue to host locations. I think it's important to note too that school districts don't have to do that. We're required to use as a first place a public space, but the most public spaces for townships like us are school districts. But the school districts are not required actually to host us at any time. So they do it because they believe in elections, they believe in democracy, they believe in collaborating with the community. And they've been a wonderful partner for a very long time and continue to be. These changes have nothing to do with any of that, with their commitment. These are changes that are brought about by the restructuring of some of the school district facilities, the closing or repurposing of school district facilities. And one instance, really an opportunity I'm seeing to be a little bit more clear about a location. And I'll go through each of these separately now. So number 7, or item 7, is to relocate the Precinct 6 from International Academy to what used to be East Hills Middle School and will now be the Bloomfield, the Eastover Elementary School. It's on Kensington Road. It presently hosts. We could. Can you put the map up? Great idea. Thank you.
Well, it's visually for the trustees.
Yeah, it's in the packets too, but this way everybody at home can follow along if they don't have the packet. Okay, great. So as you can see, Precinct 6 polling location used to be in Precinct 7, and it is now being proposed to move to within Precinct 6 itself and be at the Kensington Road location for the new Eastover Elementary School. It's a larger facility, and 2 precincts can be run side by side very efficiently. We've been offered to use the field house, in fact, which has plenty of space. So the school district has been very gracious about offering us space and planning for the setting up of these precincts. So this is a cleanup suggestion. I want to go through the other ones and then kind of come back and vote on if that's okay. So
Kind of interconnected.
They are. So precinct 7, or item 8 for precinct 7. And this is one of the changes that's requiring us to sort of push along each of these items. So Eastover Elementary School, which is on Westview Road, has been the polling location for precinct 7 for as long as we could find back in our records. It's been used a very long time. It is now closing as an elementary school. As I indicated a minute ago, it's moving to a new location that used to be East Hills Middle School. It's now going to become, again, Eastover Elementary School. I know that gets a little confusing. The old location was Eastover Elementary School. The new location's Eastover Elementary School, but it's a different facility. But with the closing of that, we could keep the precinct polling location in precinct 7 by moving them to the International Academy on Square Lake Road, right near Squirrel. It's most convenient as far as location goes. So we had to move because of the closing of Eastover. It's going to go under significant construction over the next year and then be part of the preschool programs at the Bloomfield Hills School District. So it's no longer suited for a precinct, and we had to move somewhere. I'm proposing we move to the International Academy because it keeps them within precinct 7, the easiest location to get to. We did consider, by the way, moving them to precinct, just on the slide before, Tom, we did consider a little bit about moving them to old Eastover Elementary, East Hills Middle School on Kensington, but it's a little more difficult to get to, especially for the southern part of precinct 7. So that's the proposal with regard to these two. We would move 6 out of the IA and into the new Eastover Elementary on Kensington, and move 7 into the IA. 7 therefore stays within its precinct. 6 goes back into its precinct. It's presently located outside of its actual precinct boundaries, and cleans up that opportunity for both of them. 7 IA is, my staff, we toured each of these facilities. The IA is, capable of hosting 1 location. We couldn't really keep 6 there and add 7. It just not have that kind of capacity. So that's what I'm proposing we do. We have to do this at this point in time because the deadline's required by law. There's an election this November, and this would be in place also for at least, it's a permanent change, so it's in place until we vote to change it again at a future time. Now, the last change is behind item number 9. It's kind of unrelated from the others, but Conant Elementary School is undergone a significant reconfiguration, which just doesn't make it, very suitable for the location of a polling spot. So it's going to move back down the road to what's used to be BH Middle School, and it's now South Hills Middle School, and will also be in the field house there as well. The actual location can change from time to time, but the plan currently is field house. So this serves precinct 15, which is right next door, just on the other side of Telegraph. And we used to use the BH Middle School in the past, but had moved recently to Conant. And the proposal is to move back because Conant's no longer a suitable location. So any questions generally about these? I'm happy to talk
Only
about
question I have is that, so you're moving one out of International Academy and another one in,
That's right.
and if I understand correctly, the only reason, because it wouldn't make sense to just move them around for fun, but it's to be more in the area where the actual voters are to make it more convenient in the long term. Because I know sometimes people get freaked out when we move their polling places, and
Right.
so this is going to make it more convenient for voters, and that's why you're making that move.
Yes.
That's what I
So
wanted
it
to
puts
clarify.
the polling location back within the precinct itself.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions?
Now, if the board approves these 3 changes, we would generate new voter information cards. Remember those types of things? They'd be sent out to everybody in the mail in the next week or so, pending the board's approval. And it's about 8,300 people that will receive a card for these 3 different relocations.
And you need 1 motion or 3 separate motions?
I need 3 separate motions.
Okay.
Want to start with the first one?
Make the first motion that we move location the relocation of Precinct 6 polling from the International Academy to East Hills Middle School, and which is becoming Eastover Elementary School.
Support.
Motion by trustee Barnett, support by trustee Faki. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. You want to try the next one?
Sure.
You're
Make
on
a
the roll.
motion that we relocate Precinct 7 polling location from the former Eastover Elementary School to the International Academy.
Motion by trustee Barnett.
Support.
Support by trustee Faki. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And relocate Precinct 15 polling from Conant Elementary School to the new South Hills Middle School.
Support.
So motion by trustee Barnett, support by trustee Murray. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass as well. Thank you for doing that, Martin.
Great, thank you, everybody.
Next, we have payroll and vouchers. We all had a chance to look over the August 28th ones, unless there's any changes. I'd like for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Shostak,
Support.
support by trustee Faki. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And before our next one, just a reminder that Wednesday will be our critical incident day. So in-person services will be shut down. The township campus will be shut down for safety. And we will be available by phone, by email for services, and then in-person will reopen at 12:30 when all of the roads have been reopened. So I just want to make sure to
Can you
mention.
indulge me for a minute?
Mhm.
So I was a little tongue-tied earlier, and I missed the chance to jump in, but I wanted to say a couple things about Brian.
You don't have to.
No. No, I do. I wanted to, and you know, we first met back in 2015 when I was first getting interested in running for the board, and a couple of people that I know and respect said, if you're going to do anything in Bloomfield Township, you got to talk to Brian Kepes. So I don't know if you remember that meeting in your office in Farmington Hills, and we hit it off right away, and I can tell you that you have been a mentor for me ever since that day. And I've learned that whether it's township stuff or Tamarack camps or other activities that you've been involved in, when you get into something, you come in with your full heart. You don't, just dip your toe. You really get behind things. And I remember that first election in 2016 when we were door knocking and you were handing out your Keeps commitment card. And I thought, wow, this is a great idea. Just very simple, Keeps commitment, and that's what you kept hammering on. And so, and in the 7 years since that you've been a treasurer, you have kept that commitment. And I look forward to working my hardest to also keep the Keeps commitment. I may actually put that on flyers. Follower of the Keeps commitment. But anyway, so it's been a pleasure working with you, learning from you. Anything from financial topics to everything with the board and everything. So I had to add my congratulations. And I know that, you'll be pretty available by call if I have any questions. And so I appreciate that. So thank you for indulging me. But I've been sitting on that for 2 hours now because I didn't get a chance to say it earlier. And I'm sorry that, the packed room didn't get to hear it either.
You're good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next we have our motion.
I move
to
we
adjourn.
Can I ask you, can I make the motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by treasurer Keeps.
Support.
And support by trustee Murray. You're all throwing me off on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass.
Just trying to mix it up a little bit and let
you.
Brian
Yeah.
have his last motion.
Yeah.